Good morning, and thank you very much for coming to Toronto Police Headquarters. Today, I'd like to introduce to you Detective Sergeant Ian Nickel from Financial Crimes Unit, Mass Marketing Section, who will speak to us about an investigation into a pyramid scheme. Detective Sergeant.
Good morning. Today, the mass marketing section of the the mass marketing section of the Toronto Police Service is a member of the Toronto Strategic Partnership, which is dedicated towards the investigation of mass marketing fraud with cross-border implications. In January of 2013, the Financial Crimes Unit commenced an investigation into an alleged pyramid scheme. The Toronto Police Service was assisted by the RCMP, the Competition Bureau of Canada, the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services, the Ministry of Finance, the U.S. Federal Trade Commission, FINTRAC, the Canada Revenue Agency, and the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre. It's alleged that between October of 2010 and March 2013, a pyramid scheme known as Banner's Broker was operated by the accused out of a Church Street address in Toronto. The scheme offered participants the opportunity to double their money by investing in an advertising company that had access to a globally renowned network. Participants were led to believe that their investments were being applied towards a program that offered payment for direction of web traffic via referral links. It's alleged that the program's existence was entirely dependent upon the fee-based entry of new subscribers. Little or no product, or actual product or service was provided. It's alleged that new investors were drawn into the scheme via a series of false and misleading representations. It's further alleged that by the end of 2012, over $93 million US was obtained via the scheme, and thousands of participants from worldwide participated. Approximately $45 million was paid out to early participants, the remainder of which was funneled to accounts in Belize, St. Lucia, and Cyprus, as well as others. This morning, the accused Rajiv Dixit, 45 years, of Vancouver, British Columbia, and Christopher George Smith, 45 years, of Toronto, Ontario, were arrested at 52 Division. They were transported to Old City Hall courts this morning. They're facing charges under the Criminal Code of defraud the public, possession of the proceeds of crime, laundering the proceeds of crime, and they're also facing charges under the Competition Act, which is a federal statute, of operating a pyramid scheme and making false or misleading representations. That's all I have for you, folks.
Tell us how concerning this is for you, Detective Sergeant.
I beg your pardon?
Can you tell us how concerning this crime is for you?
How serious this crime is?
How concerning it is.
How concerning it is. Well, I mean, the essence of a pyramid scheme is that it is dependent upon the entry of new participants in order to generate revenue. It's not a legitimate business venture, which is why it's illegal. Obviously, we wish to deter people from entering into this sort of thing. This investigation is a little different because in the initial stages, it's alleged that Banner's brokers made little or no effort to even imply that it was anything other than a pyramid scheme. There was some subtle twists in the language, but I believe that the majority of the participants knew or ought to have known that they were entering into a pyramid scheme. It was only later on, down the road, that the package was essentially remarketed as something other than a pyramid scheme, and participants were duped into believing that they were investing in a legitimate entity, hence the fraud charge as opposed to just the pyramid scheme.
So some people did actually get some money from this scheme originally?
There were participants that received approximately $45 million in totality. We're talking about thousands of participants here from worldwide. Early on, people who invested at the top of the pyramid received those funds. Somebody gets left holding the bag. Some of them, I believe, many of them probably knew that it was a pyramid scheme in the initial stages, and then later on, people who invested actually thought they were investing in something that was genuine, and of course, they, in most cases, didn't receive anything at all.
What is the average sum that these people were defrauded of?
The numbers vary. They can be a few $100s or several $1,000s.
In what were they investing exactly? Could you explain how?
It was marketed as an internet banners investment scheme. So you've all seen those banners that you click on that lead you to a different website, and that generates traffic. And presumably, if you're going onto a commercial website, that would, in turn, may potentially generate some revenue for the host of that website. I mean, there's lots of twists and turns here, but The essence of it is that the people who were duped into entering into this scheme believed that they were investing in an internet advertising business, a legitimate business. And in fact, no actual product was generated. There were steps that were taken to give that appearance. Companies were hired that specialized in internet advertising, but there was really no genuine effort here. We're not talking about people who tried and failed. We're alleging that this was a pyramid scheme from the get-go, and regardless of how it was dressed up with smoke and mirrors and you know, industry language, at the end of the day, this was a pyramid scheme from start to finish.
How did you get, you said this happened from 2010 to 2013. Why did it take 2.5 years before you made these arrests?
Well, this was originally brought to our attention by the Competition Bureau at the beginning of the investigation. Not all of these things are, you know, we don't always know when it's happening. It was brought to our attention. We investigated it. These types of investigations are long, convoluted investigations. There's an awful lot of resources that we had to dedicate to this. There have been 2 officers, one from Toronto and one from the RCMP, that are assigned to the mass marketing section that have been on this and nothing but this for the last 2 years. There's been seizures of electronic items seized via search warrant. There have been financial records and other documentary evidence obtained that have to be poured over. And consultations have to be made with the Crown's office in order to determine that we're making the right decisions. So this is an evidence-based investigation that took us an awfully long time to complete. And once we were satisfied that we met the threshold, we've laid the charges and arrested the persons involved.
Is it likely anybody's going to get their money back?
I doubt it.
So were those that website, was it up until you arrested these guys?
It was up until August 2014.
But you said
But the period of offenses that we're alleging covers the time period of, I think we're saying, and from October of 2010 to March 2013. And that's, I mean, we have to go with the best investigative decisions in terms of the charges that we laid, and that's the period that we're satisfied has met the threshold of the allegations.
So the people who were allegedly ripped off, are these people who were investing into the business, actually buying a piece of the business, or at least they thought? Or were these people who were buying banner ads under the impression that they would have traffic directed to their business websites or their personal websites or whatever?
There's 2 components here. We believe in the initial stages that many of the participants either knew or ought to have known that this was essentially a pyramid scheme. Down the road, as this played out, Banner's broker was remarketed as a legitimate advertising entity, but at its heart, at the core, any fees that were paid or a product that was or a profit that was generated based on the entry fees of new members, and that is a pyramid scheme.
How many victims or alleged victims do you have in this area?
At this point, all that I can say is that I'm confident there are thousands of victims worldwide. Certainly, many of them are going to be in the GTA, but I can't say anything more than that at this point.
Is there anything you can tell us about them generally, like what, saying like $93 million, and you're saying that there maybe are thousands of people who were built by this scheme, but I mean, that's a lot of money for a few banner ads. So you're like, what was it that they were doing? Are these like aspiring entrepreneurs? Are they, just people who are trying to invest their money wisely? How are they taking
I think it probably covers the whole gamut. I mean, people see opportunity, and I mean, there's a lesson to be learned here. Do your research. If something is, initially, as I say, it was obvious. We're alleging that it was obvious that if somebody looked at this scheme, you would have realized that the only money is coming from new entrants. So I wouldn't necessarily call them investors as maybe more opportunists. Down the road, they were, I would call them investors. You can call them participants, but they had an expectation that they were investing in something that was a legitimate entity, and it was not, and hence the defrauding the public charge.
So your allegation is that this thing was being run out of an address on Church Street.
That's correct.
Can you give me an idea of what kind of resources they needed to set this thing up?
Well, obviously, there's startup funds like any venture, and the company as it progressed, they hired staff, they had office space, and I can't really say much more beyond that.
Do you have an address on Church Street?
I don't have one, no.
Does it still exist? Or
It no longer exists.
Do you anticipate any charges against the people at the beginning who knew or ought to have known that this was a pyramid scheme?
Well, it's one thing to believe something, it's another thing to prove it to a criminal threshold. So it is an offense to participate in a pyramid scheme. Certainly, we're confident in the charges that we've laid. They're evidence-based. Proving that again to a criminal threshold is a different matter. So I don't anticipate there will be any further charges, but keeping in mind, if somebody knowingly participates in a pyramid scheme, there are charges that are appropriate both under the Criminal Code and the Competition Act.
Is this the kind of scheme that you can pull off with like a laptop and a cell phone, or does it take a lot more than just?
This was far more in depth than that.
Can you speak to what the later participants did? They paid some money to join, and were they then going to be told to recruit people or do all that advertising, do anything, or what did they do?
Well, essentially, when one joins, it is through a referral link that you're joining. So somebody is jumping on because someone else has either spoken about it to them or have directly referred them electronically. I mean, there's a whole number of possibilities to that. But they were originally enticed, I suppose, by other members who had joined.
Did people get paid for recruiting other members?
Well, there's a pecking order, and the earlier you're in, I presume the quicker that you'll get paid. It is alleged as part of the allegations that to some extent your ability to move further up the ladder was dependent upon the recruitment of new participants.
I'm reading on the internet that the company Banners Broker International ceased to exist in 2014, and their branches in Goa, India, Isle of Man, and Ireland were closed. So is it related?
This is an investigation with international implications. So there was a presence worldwide. There were victims worldwide, but the operation was being run from Toronto.
These two guys that are accused of alleged that they pocketed the other 50 million or most of that, other than their overhead or whatever.
What I can say at this point is the remainder of the funds, the approximately $45 million US, was funneled to accounts offshore. We are alleging that those accounts were either controlled by Dixit and Smith or effectively controlled by them.
Can you describe it all the lifestyle these two guys were leading?
I can't get into that.
Have you heard from any of the people who were later coming on into this pyramid scheme as victims, or?
There have been interviews conducted with victims.
And what have they told you?
I beg your pardon?
What have they told you?
Well, I can't get into that right now.
Did this company actually put banner ads on the internet at all?
There was, I would say that we'll call them ads. There was an effort made to demonstrate a presence on the internet. What we are alleging, based on all the evidence that we have, is that it was not a genuine effort. There was, at some point, there was an effort to give the appearance of conducting business, but we're saying that there was no real business being conducted.
Were they ads for anything but theirs itself?
What I am comfortable saying at this point, there's a lot of twists and turns here, but it was smoke and mirrors. There was nothing real that was being posted up there. Just a lot of industry language and a lot of talk about banner ads and packages, but at the end of the day, there was nothing real that was being put out there.
The accused, I know you said at least one of them was Vancouver. Do they live here?
The accused, one of the accused, currently lives in Vancouver, BC. However, prior, I believe they both lived in Toronto.
I'm sorry, did you say how many victims are from the Toronto area?
There are victims from the Greater Toronto area, but this is a worldwide scheme. What we're alleging was being operated out of Toronto, or being conducted from Toronto, but it's safe to assume, well, I know that there are victims from the Greater Toronto area.
Both of you are in custody now?
They were brought in this morning at 52 Division with the intention of being taken to Old City Hall Courthouse. I believe they're there now. They may still be in transit.
Are there any further questions?
How many investigations does does your unit, other pyramid schemes in the city that you're investigating right now?
Well, I'm not at liberty to say everything that we're investigating at the present time. We don't typically get involved in a lot of pyramid investigations. In terms of my experience, this is a first that I'm aware of, but I'm not going to get into other investigations we're conducting.
Are all the victims reported to police, or some victims they did not know this scam and they haven't reported police yet?
I'm sorry, could you just
Any
louder?
victims they haven't reported police about this scam if they thought they are in this scam?
It's quite probable that many haven't reported to us. I mean, I can't get into the evidence, but based on everything we've seen, there are thousands of victims. I'm not going to suggest for a minute that we've interviewed every single one, and I don't expect that every single one of them will come forward, no.
Should they call you?
At this point, we'll go with what we have. If somebody calls us, then we'll speak to them.
Can you give us the proper spelling of the two suspects' names again, please?
The Christopher George Smith, those are all pretty normal spellings. That's Smith with an I. And the other accused is Rajiv, that's R-A-J-I-V. The last name is Dixit, D-I-X-I-T.
And how old is Rajiv is 45 and Christopher is how old?
They're both 45 years.
Did they know each other? Like, how do they know each other?
Well, they're co-accused, and yes, they did know each other, or do know each other.
Do they have a history together?
I can't say anything beyond that.
So you say this was worldwide, right? Now, how many countries involved?
I don't know the specific number of countries. It's only limited by how many people could potentially access this on the internet. It's a large number of countries.
Can you just tell us the charges again, just so I can, the charges again?
The charges are defraud the public, possession of the proceeds of crime, and laundering the proceeds of crime. Those are the criminal code charges. The other two charges are laid under the Competition Act, which is also a federal statute with potential penitentiary implications. Operating a pyramid scheme and making false or misleading representations.
False and misleading representations.
That's correct. Well, actually, it's false or misleading representations.
What kind of jail time could they face for this?
Well, as I say, under the Competition Act, I believe there's a maximum 5-year sentence for operating a pyramid scheme. Under the criminal code, well, it's potentially quite serious. It's potentially many years, I'll put it that way.
Thank you.
Is their Twitter handle @BanishBroker?
I beg your pardon?
Is their Twitter handle @BanishBroker?
There very well may be. The website was www.bannersbrokers.com. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes today's conference. This news release, if is not up already, will be very shortly.